Did we hit the end of innovation? Is this the end of history? Can we not progress anymore as a society? The answer, of course, is no. Orange Capital Partners stands for disruptive innovation, for fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact. We believe that it's not just possible, it is actually our livelihood is bet on that. We certainly don't believe that this is the end of progress. Discuss this theme in light of a Google news that came out today, and that is that Google closed their Loon project. And I want to discuss what it takes for certain companies to succeed in delivering projects and others don't succeed, such as Google with their what they called Google X, and Loon is one of them. But to be honest, most of the Google X stuff seems just a big waste of time and an enrichment for employees, if anything else. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's January 22nd, 2021. Since the last update, the first episode today, we are up actually. So we ended up the day up 35 basis points. So we made about 2% within the course of the day. And the market is flat. We are up 24%. For the year, the market is up 2%. We're outperforming by 22%. The question, how come some companies deliver? Elon Musk's companies seem like all of them are on track to not just break through science and do amazing things, but actually deliver, make money, generate wealth. And then you have a company like Google and Google X in particular, this innovation lab of Google with people going around talking about how creative they are, but really nothing materializes. Even Waymo, the largest gorilla in the room here, one of the companies that Google X actually spun off and created their own company called Waymo, the self-driving technology. Even that is questionable, if you ask me, because the approach, and here's the gist. So let me just start talking about what I think is the reason why sometimes companies succeed and sometimes don't. This is a fundamental question, and actually, I want to just mention briefly also Caleb Whitman's podcast on the Macro Musings podcast, or his interview on that podcast, where he talks about his optimism that we are able to really productively grow our economy because of innovation, entrepreneurship, and those sort of things, and not because of the Fed policy and things like that, which in the end is also consistent with Clayton Christensen's concept that the only real economic growth comes from disruptive technology that Clayton Christensen that we define as fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices with large impact. That is real economic growth. Caleb Whitman says that we are able to do it. We at Orange Capital Partners say, yeah, we are able to do it. We actually take bets on that with Tesla and our CRISPR and genomics companies. And then there are companies that don't, such as Google. So why is it? What is going on here? Let me first sort of go through really basic Econ 101. What does it take to do something in the realm of economics? Well, it takes capital, it takes labor, it takes land, the three sort of factors of production. I think land and capital are not an issue with Google at all. So it really comes down to labor. And the labor, when I talk about labor here, I talk about creative innovation, creative thought, solving problems that haven't been either solved before or attacking problems with new approaches. And then there is the criticism, the Popperian criticism. I'm borrowing from David Deutsch. I think that those are the mechanics of progress. The mechanics of progress, there's two vectors that are there. One is the creativity. So try to be unique, 0 to 1. Peter Thiel said, be unique, do something different, do it not like everybody else. And then criticize it, Popper, criticize, replace ideas with better ideas, build an innovation stack, create problems, solve problems, create problems, solve problems, criticize, create problems, and do that in a creative way. This is the best granular way for me to describe the mechanics of progress. And now let's analyze Google versus Tesla. Let's be very specific here. How come Loon failed? How come Google has a project which sounds a bit like Neuralink? They have several, even Waymo. I wouldn't put a dime in any of these projects. In fact, the Google stock, I think, would trade higher if they just closed up everything. So it's not just us, it's the market also very skeptical. On the other hand, If Elon Musk did a holding now with all his companies, I think the value of those companies would go up multiple times, including Tesla. How come? What is the difference? Well, the difference is the mechanics of progress. Elon Musk not just religiously follows the mechanics of progress, he almost defines it. So it's almost, I got the idea to formulate my version of the mechanics of progress, which is based on the books that we build our principle stack on. So like I said in the intro, and I discussed on this podcast several times, the 4 books, 0 to 1, the innovation stack, the Innovator's Dilemma, and the Beginning of Infinity. Those are the main books that we build our principle stack on. So that's the theoretical side of things, and then we have the practical side of things, which is basically what Elon Musk is doing. So if we combine those two, we get to the mechanics of progress, and that is creative solutions for problems, either new problems or existing problems, but most importantly then criticize them, iterate, continuously iterate, fix the problems, create new problems, solve, they replace ideas with better ideas. Those are the mechanics of progress. And I believe that in companies like Google, the mechanics of progress, maybe the creativity is there, but the criticism is not there. This is the key. This is the fundamental problem, the fundamental flaw within companies like Google. There are other companies. Let's say another example that a few months ago I discussed, the book Skunk Works that I read. It's about the development of the stealth fighter within Lockheed Martin. I believe it was Lockheed Martin. And this whole idea that we have this engineering feast, this fantastic agglomeration of engineering talent and capital and government spending to build these massive creative airplanes, but then nothing came out of that. Not just that the military is barely using any of that stuff, as far as I know, but the problem is nothing really translated into the private sector, into businesses, into wealth creation, none of that. So I coined the book Skunk Works as an admission of failure of how government gets involved with the military and spending and defense spending, and how I'm against that. So I don't believe in the sort of trickle-down effect that if the government spends a lot of money on defense, that we somehow take advantage of that or any of that stuff. As I said, I don't believe in that, and Skunkworks is a good example. So let's use Skunkworks and Google just as a working example for this episode to talk about the failure of large projects with lots of capital and access of talented engineers versus the success of projects, which sometimes can be large and sometimes are not even large. They're startups, but they do succeed. What is the difference? Well, my thesis is that it is the combination of creativity and criticism. So we use David Deutsch and Popper in one. The mechanics of progress, the mechanics of wealth generation start with uniqueness, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel, and then they proliferate towards wealth generation with a Popperian process of criticism, not just criticizing the technologies and solution, but criticizing the culture. So there is also, read Hastings and No Rules Rules, the culture within Netflix, how it's continuously being evolved because people have an incentive to criticize themselves and their colleagues in a productive way, of course, with good intentions. So that process is really the mechanics of progress. It is very intangible, very soft. This is not hard stuff. In a sense, you can't put this in formulas yet. Maybe one day you will, but right now we can't. Economists are at loss here. It's very difficult to quantify these things, to aggregate them in a way that we can say, well, this country or this company will succeed and this won't. It is the job of us investors to find those situations and then put capital against them. So why is Tesla succeeding? It's because we have creative solutions, starting with Elon Musk, trying to figure out things in a new way, in a different way. But then we also have this criticism, this continuous evolvement of ideas, of solutions to problems that create new problems. And then we create those. So this is the innovation stack, Jim McKelvey. These are the mechanics of progress. And this is why I think this is my belief. This is why projects fail. This is why we have situations like Google Loon, where people, I believe, lose track of the purpose of the project because they're not really working towards solving the problem. The purpose, let's say, of Project Loon was to bring low-cost internet to, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa. That is a purpose. You can argue that's a fine purpose. My conjecture is that none of the Google employees was standing behind that purpose. Nobody really believed in it. The problem was never really tackled. It was an excuse to do science within a business context, to do engineering within a business context, and I'm sorry, but also to have a lavish lifestyle. Employees enrich themselves. The losses of Google X are probably 80% of those losses are just overhyped salaries and consulting fees and whatnot. There isn't much real progress that was invested in a sense that, okay, fine, we built this factory, we built this technology, we just can't use it right now. The reason I'm so harsh on it is because I'm just listening, I'm just conjecturing from the input that I'm getting from these people, from people that I know personally, but then also from people that I hear in the CEO of Waymo or the CTO of Waymo that I recently heard an interview with. I met other people either in person or at conferences and listened to their presentations. It is a common theme also, let's say, Sebastian Thrun, the former head of the Google self-drive technology endeavor. There's a certain aloofness, I would even use the word arrogance a bit, a certain, well, I don't really care what the purpose is as long as I do it. You know, I'm a smart person and what I do is creative and it's my personal brand which is being pushed above the actual purpose or delivery of the technology. Contrast that to Tesla. Of course, there's one personal brand, Elon Musk, no question about it. But then other than that, it's really about the mission, it's about the purpose, it's about finding solution to actually deliver against that mission. We're all human. I understand it's not always perfect. Do people at Tesla aggrandize themselves sometimes? Yes. Do people at Neuralink or whatnot, or Boring Company or SpaceX use that brand or that fact that they work in that particular company as an aggrandizing factor? Of course they do sometimes. Nobody's perfect. But I'm not getting that sense almost never from people that either work there, used to work there, or are in any kind of conjunction with those companies. And I think this is, again, this episode is not necessarily about Tesla and Google or something like that. It's completely irrelevant. I'm just using those examples. Take Skunkworks. So Skunkworks was a development project within Lockheed Martin to build very, very difficult engineered planes to solve certain problems, such as being stealth, not being able to catch the plane through radar. Other planes they did was very high altitude planes, fast planes, things like that. Those are laudable endeavors. They can be used in army contexts, and I'm not a pacifist. I don't have a problem with advanced weaponry to fight the bad guys. The problem I have a problem with wasting taxpayers' money. And forget, it's not just that, wasting talent, wasting creative innovation within a context or within lack of Popperian epistemology, or when there is not enough purpose and not enough criticism to work towards a solution that is actually, how should I say, that is really going to work in reality. What is iteration? What is Popperian epistemology? It's trying things and then testing them against the laws of physics. That's really what it is. SpaceX works like that. Starship 9 is going to be tested against the laws of physics. And then it's going to be tweaked, improved. And again, we're testing against the laws of, that's what we do. We know the laws of physics, or at least from what we know about the laws of physics. So we can then try to tweak atoms in a way that we predict how they're going to interact with the laws of physics, or actually the laws of physics will act upon them through us doing some things, let's say increase the pressure of the Starship tank or fire the Raptor engines, and then we see how the laws of physics act through the materials that we chose and the designs that we chose. The same thing is with the Tesla self-drive. The Tesla self-drive is an algorithmic solution to the laws of physics acting through the car while driving. That's really what it is. And the iteration that Tesla is using here is pretty obvious. They're using the million cars in the fleet, and soon the 1.5, 2, 3 million cars in the fleet, to test and learn and continuously test and learn. That is testing at scale. Andrej Karpathy, the head of Tesla AI, has said many times that it's about scalable experience gathering. Or in other words, use a lot of data, run them through the algorithms, and find ways to either improve the algorithms right away or at least improve the driving with the existing algorithms. Software 2.0 is a concept where the software writes itself. So what you do is you tweak the algorithms in such a way that the software uses the data to write itself. Those are kinds of things, and certainly that's happening at Waymo also. But I would say at Waymo, this whole religious conversation about LiDAR, in my view, is a typical lack of Popperian epistemology. Why are you hanging on to LiDAR? It's because you started with it, because you can't admit to yourself that it's wrong, it's too expensive, and it's leading you towards the wrong path. That's the problem. Now giving up now would say you concede to Tesla, and you don't want to do that. So this lack of Popperian epistemology, this lack of developmental algorithmic approaches, iterative approaches to problems, this, in my view, is the key problem that any kind of organization has when they try to evolve in an innovation stack, or even worse, when they compete with an innovation stack company. Lastly, I want to mention Herbert Diess, Volkswagen. Very disappointed at him. He has been acting up in the last couple of months. The famous selfies with Elon Musk were probably the first time he showed his real face. Now he's, I would say, trolling Elon Musk on Twitter. Okay, that's a different conversation. Should the CEO of a large automaker troll the one company which is disrupting the space? But what it really shows is there is complete lack of creativity and lack of epistemology, Popperian epistemology within Volkswagen. There is no such thing as, oh, we're going to change the course and learn from mistakes and get better and things like that. There is just basically there is a call to war. There is a trolling of the one guy which is basically disrupting your industry. There is maybe a cultural attempt to rally the troops around this cry of let's go after Elon Musk, and that's very disappointing. It's not going to succeed, and it just shows that it's so difficult for companies. I would call Volkswagen is my third example. So you have Google, you have Skunkorps, and then you have Volkswagen. These large companies with lots of assets, lots of capital, and lots of talented people are unable to adapt to this new world of creative progress that Kalabatny about, that we're talking about at Orange Capital Partners, that Peter Thiel is talking about, and that, of course, Elon Musk is executing.